Hi, we're live. I'm Sue Borison, and I'm here with Allison Tate, the Director of College Counseling at an independent school in Florida. She's also an independent educational consultant. So we are waiting for some people to show up because we're a little early. We'll make the introduction again. And as you come on now, we'd love to see where you're coming from, what part of the country, world you're coming from. So go into the comments and just put down where you're coming from. I am in Cleveland, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. Allison is in Florida. Where in Florida?
A suburb of Orlando. So Central Florida. Yeah.
So are you a season, under normal circumstances, are you a season pass holder?
I am an annual pass holder, not the full year because I am a native Floridian and we don't go to Disney in the summer, but I have the pass that lets you get in, at the non-busy times.
Yeah. We used to have a really nice park near us, and it was our summer activity, and then it closed, and it was like, what do you do now?
Disney is not our summer activity. We stay far away, but it's a really nice, I will say that as a native and as somebody who's lived here most of her life, it's a nice afternoon activity out for a couple of hours, do a couple of rides and have dinner and then go home, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's what you could do if you have a pass. When we used to go with our kids when they were younger, you had to get there when it started and you left when it closed because you needed to get your money's worth.
Yeah, I'm in awe of my friends who plan a vacation and actually Disney all day, every day.
It's so expensive. You got to do it. Okay, let's go into why people are here. We are going to talk about junior year. And junior year, I've had 5 kids be juniors in high school. And it sadly, it lives up to its reputation. It kind of reminds me of that experience as a young mother when everyone talks about the terrible twos. And you're sure it's not going to hit you that's the same way. We're just not going to go through it the way everyone else did. And then, junior year shows up and everyone's warning you. And I'm like, yeah, we're not going to get caught up in this. And then there's almost no way around it. So do you have some just overarching tips for parents of how not to get sucked into the whole junior year thing?
I mean, it can be hard. I'm on my second high school junior, and he's a junior right now in very strange circumstances, obviously, and he's starting to feel kind of the panic. I think that, as parents, part of our job is to, when they were little, the mantra was, they're like horses. They can smell fear. They know when you're afraid. You can't be afraid because the toddlers totally know it and totally will, vibe off of you. It's the same with teenagers. They vibe off of you. And one thing I've learned from working with teenagers so much is how very influential parents are on the kids and on their mindsets. And if you can stay calm, they will stay calmer. I can't say they'll stay completely calm, but they definitely get their lead from the parents. So what I would say to parents is just try to stay deep breathing exercises. If you're going to freak out to your friends. Don't freak out to your kid. Try to remember that things work out. They just work out. I'm not going to say that they work out that everything happens for a reason or that, it's all for the best, but I will say that things work out and kids end up somewhere great for them eventually. So, you're going to get there. Try to stay calm and just remember that you have way more influence on your kid than they let you know. And maybe that you remember sometimes in the heat of the moment.
I think that one of the funny things is that, everyone tells you it works out and you don't really quite understand what that means, but it works out because that's your reality. So your kid shows up and, it's like if you didn't buy the perfect house, you don't lament the rest of your life that you are in this house. You live your life in this house. And it's the same thing.
It feels very high stakes. And I think that we get very caught up in that if they take one misstep, their future's over and it's very high stakes. That is just not true. And if we remember back to when we were teenagers and college wasn't always perfect for us. Nothing goes completely well all the time. Maybe it wasn't the best fit in the whole world, but you made it work. And maybe it was the best fit in the whole world, but you still had times where you were like, is this where I'm really supposed to be? Or did I make a mistake? And, I think that we just forget that it's all part of the process of growing up and becoming who we're going to be. And that there are very few mistakes that are so bad that they change your whole life trajectory. And college is not one of them. It just isn't. So just remember, it's going to be okay. And I always tell the kids, it's going to be okay in the end. And it's not okay, it's not the end. You still have more path to go.
That's great. That's really good words. Wise words.
It's not my wise words. It's a quote. Like you can but I like it. So.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're on listening right now and you have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll get to them. And the first thing we're going to start with is the to-do list. So let's just go through the things that juniors have to do their junior year.
Right. So the first thing is to nail down a testing strategy. Standardized testing this year is all of Twitter because we've had tests canceled. Kids have shown up for tests and they haven't happened. Some kids have had 6 or 7 test dates canceled, and a lot of the schools have gone test optional this year, which is great. Some of the schools have gone test blind, which is even better. And the differences between those are test optional means that a young adult is not going to be disadvantaged by applying to a school without test scores, without an SAT or an ACT. They won't be at a disadvantage. They will read their application and evaluate them and not ding them for not having a test score. Test blind means they're not looking at test scores from anybody. So even if somebody else applies and has a test score, they're not even going to look at their test score, which really does even the playing field completely. And, for most schools, it's just test optional. So if a kid has a very high test score, that could still be a very big advantage for them. But if you don't have a test score at all, it's not going to be a disadvantage. It's kind of a weird situation. But in most cases, and I think going into next year, a lot of schools might go back to taking standardized testing scores, and some of the ones that are test optional this year won't be test optional next year. So it's good to have a plan in place. I do not think that juniors should be taking tests right now. And I know a lot of juniors took a test in August here in Florida because we are hosting tests here right now. And in most of the country, it's not a problem. They are hosting tests right now. But I don't believe in a lot of juniors taking tests in the fall, unless there are a couple of reasons why you might in a normal year, including your sports seasons. If you have a very busy sports season in the spring, you might want to try and get it done in the fall. It all depends on which math you're in, and if you finish the math to maximize your test score. But for the most part, and this year especially, juniors probably shouldn't even be thinking about it until March, because right now these fall tests really should go to the seniors. If they can host tests at all, the seniors should get the seats. The juniors can sit back, study their curriculum, do well in their classes, read books, prepare for the tests, and then try taking it in March. You'll still, hopefully, have plenty of sittings before you apply in the fall.
So how do you know which of the tests? So we have ACT and SAT. How do you know which one your kid should study for?
So a lot of parents will tell me, well, I just want them to take a test so that they'll have a baseline. And, I don't recommend taking official tests as a baseline. I recommend taking practice tests as a baseline because statistically, the testing experts in this country will tell you that your strongest test score is probably going to come on your second or third sitting, your second or third official sitting. And then after that, unless you do something drastically different, like you've never had prep before and suddenly you do prep, or something very big happens, your testing scores are either going to flatline or they're going to fall off. And also the kids get fatigued and burned out and they start to get like glassy dead eyes. So you want them to not take 5, 6, 7 tests. And I see a lot of that actually on a normal year. Yeah, it's
what do you recommend? What's the number you recommend?
2 or 3. And then I recommend saying that's your score and moving on to the elements that you actually can control, like your essays and your recommendation letters and your grades, and your leadership roles. Because every school in this country, including Harvard, Yale, UVA, Princeton, they will all tell you they do not intend for standardized testing to be an extracurricular activity for these kids. They want them to take the tests and move on with their lives. And these kids should not be taking 6 or 7 tests, but they do.
That's the quotable line.
Yeah.
Test taking is not an extracurricular activity.
Seriously, I tell the kids all the time, who you are every day of the week is so much more important than who you are for a random 3 hours on a Saturday morning. And the colleges all feel that way too. They really do. They honestly feel that way. And it's hard for them to believe, but it's true. And it's in terms of picking which test is right for you, you can take a practice SAT, you can take a practice ACT. Both companies put out books with old tests in them, and you can take them under timed conditions at home. Your mom can time you. I think there are apps on the phone that you can get that will proctor exams for you and give you timed conditions. And a lot of testing prep companies will do practice tests for free as a way of doing free marketing for themselves. They will proctor free exams for the kids. I just say take a practice test in both and see how you like them. And whichever one you like better and feel more comfortable in and score better in, go with it. And then prep for that test and don't prep for both. There is no advantage to taking both tests. There's no advantage to submitting both test scores, just the one that you like the best.
So growing up in the East Coast, we never heard of the ACT. Is that less common now? Like are all the coasts, both coasts and in between are looking at ACT as an opportunity?
Absolutely. Every school in this country looks at both the SAT and the ACT equally. I will say the ACT is still more popular in the Midwest, and there are some colleges that, the vast majority of the students applying there do use an ACT, but I don't know of a college that doesn't take both and look at both equally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about extracurricular activities, not test taking, but the real ones.
Yeah, when you're not taking tests and studying for tests. Yeah. So, in freshman year, I really encourage kids to experiment, like join clubs, join any club you might be interested in, try a sport, try anything you want. Sophomore year, you want to kind of narrow that down a little bit and sort of figure out what you're really interested in, where you're really going to spend the majority of your time. By junior year, you should kind of know what your things are, and it doesn't need to be 5 or 6 things. It can be 2 things. It can be 3 things. Maybe if you have, a club or a team at school, and then you have a few things at home, maybe a church or a youth group through your place of worship, or, some kind of pursuit that you do on your own. But, 2 to 3 things that you really like to spend time doing and that you want to put your energy and effort into. And then you want to think about ways that you can cultivate leadership roles in that. If you really love soccer, then maybe you are working your way up the team. Maybe you're growing into a leadership role on the team, but maybe you also want to volunteer and ref for little kids games, or volunteer for a Special Olympics soccer team, or, have some kind of role in the community where you help others learn how to love the sport that you love. And it really can be anything. You don't have to have a worthy extracurricular activity. You can actually care about anything you want to care about and do whatever lights your fire. That's fine. I know kids who love bird watching and birding, and that's just as amazing. And you can do just as much doing that as you can with anything else. So I try to tell the kids, don't pick it based on what you think is going to look good on a college application, because what is going to look good on a college application is what genuinely interests you. And just be yourself. And that's much better than trying to fit the mold of what you think colleges want.
And yet we still try to pick the instrument for our kid that the colleges.
Right. The oboe. The oboe is the good one, right? Truly, I think that anyone working in college admissions, what I try to tell the kids, you don't work in college admissions unless you like young people and you want to hear their stories and you genuinely want to hear what they are actually interested in. Otherwise, it's a pretty miserable job. So I think that, the kids need to have permission to just be themselves and, do what they want to do. But yeah, you can't pick the instrument for them because they can smell that one a mile away.
So Lori just said that her son's taking the SAT with the essay this Saturday. Mm-hmm. Good luck to your son.
Yes, good luck.
Okay, so this one we never talked about in my family, but it's such a good piece of advice. Like thinking about your relationships with the teachers that you're going to ask for recommendations as like a real goal, not to game any system, right?
No, I think that when the kids are younger, freshman and sophomore year, they're a little more intimidated by teachers, and they're still new to the school. They haven't quite taken ownership of their place in the school yet. But junior year teachers are the ones who generally write recommendation letters for college. You want to have a teacher who has had you recently and who has had you long enough to have a good impression of who you are in the classroom. Teacher recommendation letters are the most important element of an application in terms of recommendation letters. And that's because colleges are looking for students and they are trying to find out who you are in a classroom. Are you the kid who comes prepared, who engages in the material, who starts conversations about the material and discussions and participates and gets other kids excited about the material, that kind of thing. But also the teachers need to have some kind of idea of who you are. So I think that, what I tell the kids is just be aware that these kids or these teachers junior year are probably going to be the ones writing your recommendation letters. And not that you need to game the system or you need to, butter them up or anything like that, but just try and be aware of which teachers you connect with the most. Like, which teachers do you feel comfortable with? And to have that sense as you go through the year and just sort of develop those relationships, make sure that you are conscious about it, because not every kid, some kids are introverts and naturally shy. And it is a little bit more of an effort to make those connections in class. And I think that if it's a little nudge that gets them out of their shells a little bit, then that's a good thing, for them.
I mean, it's so painful to think of those kids because, it's really hard for them. On the other hand, maybe if we think about it as a training ground for when they go to college, you're going to really want them to be able to go to office hours if they need it, right?
Definitely. And that's one of the hardest things for college kids. I know, having had college kids, and you don't want them to be so intimidated by their professors that they can't reach out to them. I actually talked to a student today at school who had been struggling with something, and she was afraid to tell her teacher that she was struggling. So she just fell behind and didn't say anything. And I said, this is a real learning moment for you. Like, you need to think about the fact that teachers love you. Like, they want to help you. If you reach out to them and say, I just need a moment, it goes a long way to tell them that I care about your class. I care about this material. I care about you. I just need a moment. And I think that this generation especially feels a lot of pressure not to make mistakes, not to fall off pedestals, not to show vulnerability. And I think that it's a good way to model that to them and say, I know that it might not be the most natural thing for you to speak up in class or to ask questions, but this is how you're going to get the most out of your classes in college too. And this is high school is a great place to try and get used to it. And that's what it should be, is a place to kind of grow up a little bit and grow into those roles.
Yeah. And the good news is there's no way to get that wrong. That piece of reaching out, you can't get it wrong.
No, high school teachers love kids. They are not high school. I told this girl today, I said, she's not here for the glamour or the money. Trust me. She's here because she loves you guys. And you need to trust your teachers to take care of you and to say, I'm struggling. Like, this is when they're in high school, this is when they can do that, and in college, it's going to be harder. You're in a bigger place. It's a bigger thing. I don't really believe in roughing them up in high school to get them ready for college. I think that high school is where they should be able to make mistakes and fall down a little bit, and it should be okay. And we really need to tell them that mental health wise, it's important.
Okay. Next thing in terms of the to-do list, is now a good time to start putting your list together of colleges that you want to consider?
Definitely. I think that you can't start this. You can start it too early. You shouldn't be making your list in middle school. Definitely. But I do think that junior year is a good time to start thinking about it actively and being thoughtful about, even just your preferences. Like, parents are always like, where do we start? You start with asking your kid, how do you feel about winter? And I have a lot of kids say, sorry about my dog's barking because I have 4 kids, yay, and 3 dogs. But you start by saying, how do you feel about winter? And kids will say, well, I love my ski vacations with my family once a year. Okay, so you like winter for a week. Do you like winter for 6 months? Do you like winter for 4 months? Like, how much winter can you handle? That actually rules out a lot of schools if the kid doesn't like winter. So, I was a kid who grew up in Florida and desperately wanted a winter. So I did not want to stay in the South. I wanted to get up north. And that had a big influence on where I applied. So I literally start with that. I remind the kids that you don't just go to school for 4 years. A lot of kids focus on the wedding and not the marriage. It's all about getting in, but not about actually going to school and living somewhere. So I try to approach it right from the get-go as this is going to be your home for 4 years. You're going to live somewhere for 4 years. So let's talk about where you're going to be happy, because I was thrilled to go to college in New Jersey and have 4 seasons. My husband, who was born in Texas, he did not love New Jersey in the winter at all. It was a sad time for him in the winter. So, there are definitely kids who need to think about it, and not just the bumper sticker, not just the US News and World Report ranking, but actually living somewhere. And so you start there. And this year, it's so much better than it has been ever before, because every single college in America has had to up their virtual game. They all have campus tours. They all have information sessions. They all have all these panels online. There is no excuse. You can't not learn about a college online right now. So you can sort of start making a list and figuring out where might be good places for you. And junior year, you still have a lot of time to narrow that list down. So it's a good thing.
Do you think that, are you finding with like your students and the kids you're tutoring that they're considering less of a geographical, like, do they want to be closer to home because of COVID?
I do see that. Yeah, I have not every kid. There are still kids who want to go far from home. There are kids who are very frustrated that they can't go far from home right now. But I do see a lot more kids who, and families in general, who are saying maybe they shouldn't go so far away from home, especially after watching a lot of families in the spring when the shutdown happened so quickly and people had to leave so quickly. And there's some of the students still have their things packed up at a college somewhere right now. So I think we all saw that happen. And some families are saying, we have like a 6-hour driving radius, or I've had kids who say, I want to stay here in Orlando. I don't want to leave because, with everything going on, maybe I'll leave later, but not right now. So yeah.
It's a little bit of a weird time, but there, as you said, there are some opportunities that are presenting that wouldn't have happened in the past. So if we go into some general information, like things that parents might not know about right now, you talked about the college visits, but I also, I just want to say, from like hearing about people in general, even when you could go in person for college visits, the time from the end of junior year till applications, like I've heard of kids who go to visit a school on vacation in like fall of their senior year and end up there. Yeah. So you can't go in person now, right? It's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. And I think that we are forgetting that a little bit, that that usually a lot of kids don't see schools until spring of their senior year even. Some of them don't go until they've gotten into schools. That's not usually what I recommend if you can do it, but it absolutely can go that way. I think that the important thing is to be very thoughtful about your college choices for your list, to have a range of schools on your list in terms of selectivity, to really do your homework on what's going to be affordable for you, because that is a huge part of making a college list. And I know you just interviewed Jeff Slingo the other day, who gets in and why. And he and I have had this conversation about how, a lot of the college list should be about really being honest about what is feasible for your family. And also, if your student has a profile in terms of their grades, their scores, if scores are an issue, their academic record and their extracurricular activities that is very strong for a particular private small school, they might be very willing to give your child a lot of money to woo them there, that another school might not. And you need to be smart about that, and to think and to keep your mind open and look around, because your child's dream school might be one they've never heard of before. I had a family recently who was asking me about college recommendations, and the boy said, I only want to apply to schools I've heard of, like really big names, because I'm going to need that for my, resume, and I want to have a career, and I want everybody to know where I went to college. And I said, so of the 4 of you, because there were some step parents involved and everything, I said, which ones of you have heard of Williams College before? And here in Florida, we don't talk about Williams College very often, and none of them had ever heard of Williams College before. And I said, so that's the #1 ranked small private liberal arts college in the country right now, by U.S. News and World Report. So it's #1, and none of you have heard of it. So maybe what you've heard of isn't actually so important. Like maybe we should look at schools you've never heard of before, but might be perfect for you and be a place where you can grow and thrive. So I just think that right now is such a good opportunity both to research those schools that you might not have ever heard of before, but that might be awesome. And also to go to each school's website that does land on your college list. And every school by law has to have a net price calculator. And you can go on that net price calculator and you can give it your financial information and you can get a really good estimate of what that college might expect you to pay. And that way you can be realistic about which schools are feasible for your family and which schools might be really excited about your child. And I always say, let's think about the schools where you're going to be celebrated and not just tolerated. You know, like it's really nice to be wanted. And a family that I know locally today, the daughter got into her first college, and it's a small private college here in Florida. And they offered her $90,000 in scholarship money. And she's not like, you know, she's a great kid, but she's not the top of anything. You know, she's just a great kid. And she feels really good about herself right now. And that's a really big win, especially in September, October. You know, this is a good thing to feel good.
And her parents probably are feeling really good too.
Yeah, they're very excited.
When you told that story about Williams to that boy, did you see his eyes change? Like, is he open now to the conversation?
Yes. I mean, he definitely, the point had been made. Definitely. I saw the change in his parents' eyes more than in his. And I think that again, what I said at the beginning, the parents definitely have so much influence on the kids. And if I could tell you how many times I've been meeting with kids privately, and I will suggest a college that is really a great target school for them. And they'll say, my dad says that's not a good school, or my mom doesn't like that place. She says it's not a good school. And I don't think that the parents have any idea that their kids are listening to them that closely, but then the kid has turned that off in their brain thinking that'll disappoint my mom if I go there. Mm-hmm. And I've had to tell so many kids, you know, I had a student last year who said, I just don't want to disappoint my mom because she talks to her friends all the time on the phone and I can hear her. And I just don't want her to feel like she can't be proud of the school that I'm going to when she talks to her friends. Right. And I said, honey, I have never met a mom who hasn't, the minute that school takes you and it's your school, that's the best school in the whole wide world because they took her baby. And she will be all in. She'll be wearing the t-shirts. She'll be putting the bumper sticker on her car. I guarantee it. Like, parents are proud of their kids. Believe me. And I tell them it's a lot like baby names. Like when you're pregnant, if you tell people the names that you're thinking about, they will tell you all the reasons you shouldn't use that name. But if you just introduce them to your baby who's named, you know, Ezekiel, everybody thinks that's the best name ever. And, you know, they'll never tell you that they think it's a bad name. So not that Ezekiel is a bad name. It's a totally fine name. I love the nickname Zeke. It's all good. But that's what I tell the kids is that, you know, and I think that parents, you just have to watch what you say. You have to watch your language. You have to watch the way you react to things. And I'm a parent. I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. It's really hard. It's super hard. But anytime a kid gets into a college, whatever college it is, you celebrate it like it's Harvard. That is the best news ever. I mean, somebody wants you to go there, that your kid got into college. That's cause for celebration. And you don't use the word safety when you talk about schools because safety sounds like loser. You can talk about schools that you're more likely to get into, schools that are, you know, less selective maybe on their selectivity rank, but that doesn't mean they're not an amazing school. There are some schools that have very high acceptance rates and are to go to college. So I feel like we take the lead on that.
Okay, so what is the common data set?
The common data set is it's basically a form that the schools have to fill out every year for all sorts of information, institutional research data. And they almost every college in the country, not all of them, but almost all of them have it on their websites, but they will not advertise it to you. So you can Google common data set and then the name of the institution, like common data set, University of Florida, or common data set, Ohio State University. And usually you can pull it up pretty easily. And then you click on the latest one, which right now I think is the 2019-2020 version. And there is admissions data in there. You have to get past it's enrollment data and then it's admissions data. And the admissions data section can be really interesting because it is raw data without any spin, without any kind of marketing people getting involved, and without the media getting involved. And I say that as a member of the media. And you can look, they have a chart where they rank the elements of the application. And there are certain schools where, Harvard, everything's important, big news. But for instance, Duke University, if you look at Duke's, they don't consider class rank at all. And I've used that a couple of times with kids who are obsessed with Duke and their class rank. And I've said, Duke doesn't care about your class rank. So you actually can have a study hall senior year. It's going to be okay. Like if you have an unweighted class, nobody is going to die. Your GPA and who you are class rank wise, if you're number 5 or number 7, you're going to be fine. It takes a little pressure off the kids sometimes. The University of Florida ranks the essay above standardized test scores on a normal year. Actually, the University of Florida is not test optional this year, not by their own choice, but that's another story. But every year they've ranked the essay above the standardized test score, which I think would come as big news to the kids who apply to the University of Florida. They really care about the essay, and people don't realize how important it is. They think if they have a really high test score and really high grades, they're golden. And the University of Florida would tell you, no, they're not. They do read those essays and they care a lot about them. So I just think that the common data set can tell you some things that you might not know or realize. And then they also have test score breakdowns, they have GPA breakdowns. And then at the very end of the common data set, they have financial aid breakdowns where they break down how much money they give to non-need, like how much non-need-based aid is given out, how much merit aid is given out, and to whom, and what percentage of the student body gets it. And it's very interesting when you look at NYU, and you realize that NYU's average merit-based award is $5,000. So if it costs $75,000 to attend NYU, that's still a very big amount of money to come up with every year. And it can be very enlightening. So I try to give that to kids because I can talk until I'm blue in the face and they might not listen to me about the importance of the essay. But if I can pull up raw data and show it to them, it's really hard to deny it.
Also, the great part about your NYU story is that, there's also this dream about merit aid. And so you can actually go and see that your kid's really not going to get merit aid from NYU. So if you can't afford it, you could take that off the list before anybody feels very invested in that as a school.
Yeah, there's a lot of magical thinking about money in college. And apparently every child is going to college for free. And that is not what's happening. So, I think I talk to kids all the time, and I cannot stress enough to parents, please be honest with your children about your financial college situation, because there is nothing more heartbreaking than seeing a kid really work so hard to get into college and then not be able to afford it and not have any idea beforehand that they can't. It's fine to go in with it with realistic expectations and to know it's probably not going to work out. And, you can choose to apply anyway if you want to. It's another thing when it comes out of the blue. And I try to get kids to have honest conversations with their parents. But I think, again, parents are in the lead there. And it's really important to tell kids, if you have a 529, if you have college savings, if you have, like here, we have Florida prepaid scholarships, but merit aid is not the savior that people think it is. There are very few full rides available in this country, and they're very competitive. So,
okay, my computer just went to red for some reason, and so I'm going to get my charger. And while I get up to get my charger, you did already talk about demonstrated interest. But there is this kind of rumor out there that going to the college is the best way to show that. And obviously we can't do that today. So how do we calm people down about this? And then I'll be right back.
Okay. The demonstrated interest this year, there's, a lot of different ways to show demonstrated interest. If a student is on social media, they can follow the colleges on Instagram. They can follow them on Facebook if they're on Facebook. Not a lot of kids on Facebook, but Instagram, I actually learn a lot about colleges on Instagram. So it's not a bad thing to follow them if you're on Instagram. You don't have to be on Instagram if you're not on Instagram. If you go to a high school that is hosting virtual college visits, which I am hosting virtual college visits every day of the week right now. And I have college admissions officers one-on-one, usually just with me because the students aren't showing up all the time. And I'm connecting with the college admissions officers. I could totally get into college if I needed to right now. But anyway, they're so available. And almost every single one of them has said, if any students have any questions, give them my email. They can connect with me. Right now, I'm working from home. We're not traveling. We're so much more available than we usually are. We're open for questions. They understand that these kids have been through a lot, and they understand that the pandemic's still going on for many parts of this country. They're going through it too. So they're very open to connecting with students, trying to answer questions. But if you attend one of their live sessions, if you attend a student panel, usually they have you register for that. That's all demonstrated interest. Attending something online is demonstrated interest. If you know who the representative is that covers your school or your county, and you email them and you ask them a genuine question that is not just like, do you have dorms or a dining hall, something then that's demonstrated interest because you're going out of your way to try and contact them and talk to them. But they're very aware that you can't come walk on their campuses right now very easily. So
I love that piece of information because I think there's a hesitation to maybe be perceived like there's almost like a worry that there's a checklist at schools that kids who call too many times are never going to be accepted. So, but they're there to answer your questions, reasonable questions.
And honestly, unless you want to identify yourself, you can often call a college without identifying yourself ever. And they're not going to say, can I have your name so I can write you down on the no list, on the really annoying list? No. If you call and ask questions, they're not going to, force you. You can ask your dumb questions anonymously, and you can ask, questions you feel comfortable about and tell them, I'm so-and-so, I go to this high school, and I'm really interested in your college and I would like to talk about this. Another way of demonstrated interest is to apply early to those schools. I know you went through the different ways of applying to a school with Jeff, but you don't have to apply early decision to show interest. You can apply early action. It's not the same commitment, but it's something. And I think that also the way you write your applications can show demonstrated interest. There are a lot of colleges that have the YS essay on their application. And, it can be frustrating for kids because these kids have never been to college before. So they really are taking a guess at where they should go to college. But at the same time, the college is asking you, have you thought critically about where you're applying? What is it about us? Like, are you dating everybody or are you serious about us? Are we exclusive or what's going on here? And the more you can show them that you have done your research, that you know about their college, the specific programs that you'd be interested in, a lot about what they offer in those Why Us essays, that's demonstrated interest too. So it can be all sorts of things.
Okay, so I want to, for our last section that we're going to cover, talk about what are the tips you give parents and teens to reduce the anxiety during this time?
So one thing that a lot of counselors like to recommend is that you pick one day of the week, like one evening or one time, Sunday afternoons or Tuesday nights, and you say, this is going to be the designated time when I'm allowed to ask you about college applications. And then you have to stick to it and not nag them, not ask them, like don't talk about it the rest of the week. Don't talk about college. That's a lot of self-discipline for parents. And I can't say that it's super easy for me, but it really does help the kids. The kids do not want to feel like they're a walking college application to you and that's all that you're worried about and that's all that you care about. one of the good things, if there is a counselor or a parent, or not a parent, an adult or a counselor or a teacher or somebody else that they can work with or talk to at school about college applications, and you can just be their mom or dad, that's such a gift to a kid, because they really need a soft place to fall, especially junior and senior year. And if they feel like you might be judging how they're doing, college application wise, or if this is going to look good to colleges, or if they are maybe veering away, or they're lagging behind, or they're running late, being their babysitter is not a good idea about this. I mean, they are about to go off into the world. They're about to be adults, and this is really their journey. So I really recommend, if you can, it doesn't have to be somebody you pay. It can be the school counselor. It can even be like a family friend that you think could be a connection for them. If they have somebody else they can ask questions to, and you can just be their mom or dad, that's huge. Other than that, I would say the college list is a really big way of alleviating stress. I know you and I talked about this the other day. I told you that my big goal with my child, who had a lot of inherent pressure on him based on where his parents went to college, was to find a school that we knew he could get into, that we knew he could afford, and that he really liked. Not like, worst case scenario, I have to go to this place, because that is not a good idea for anybody. That is not what you want. But a school that you walk around and say, I really like it here. Like, I can see myself here. Even if it's just online for right now. But if you can find that school where you know you have a really good shot of getting in there, and you know you can afford it, that takes a lot of pressure off a kid. A lot of angst about not going anywhere, because I think every kid's nightmare is, I'm not going to get in anywhere. And I've told every kid I talk to, I say, you can go to college. It is not hard to go to college in this country. Over 80% of colleges in America take more than half their applicants. There are very few colleges relatively that are super selective and that are really hard to get into. The majority of colleges are actually very accessible, and they're great. They're not bad schools. I have a hard time even believing there are bad schools. I think I can find something great about every college. So I think that when you take that pressure off a kid, and when you believe it yourself, that's a good game plan for junior year. And just
I've heard of people that did the 1 day a week thing, and it really took it dropped the pressure in the house so dramatically.
Yeah.
When you hear a kid talk about the school, does that make you like, do you want to move it away from like all success is that school because we can't control?
Yes, it gives me a panic attack when they're like all in on one school, unless it's, around here, if you're top 10% and you have a certain thing, you're auto admit at UCF, which is amazing. And I cannot tell you the relief when kids had come into me and said, I want to go to UCF. And I'm like, looking at I'm like, oh my God, you're already in, you're good. Like, that was easy.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I get really panicky when kids only want one school. It's not, and I think this is a good lesson for life, right? Like, there's not just one person for everybody. There's not only one ship in the sea. There's plenty of other places where you might be happy. And I feel like with colleges, I don't believe in the soulmate model for colleges either. There are a lot of places, and sometimes it's not your first choice that you end up attending, and yet it becomes your first choice. You love the place where you are. You bloom where you're planted. And I think that it's really important as parents, again, to model that. And I try to encourage adults who went through that in their own college experience to speak up and say, I didn't go to maybe my dream school. Even if I got into it, I couldn't afford it, which it was really hard to afford things back when we applied to college. And yet I loved where I went, and I found my best friends there. I enjoyed my classes. I'm a thriving adult with a job and a career, and it's not the be all end all. Where you go to college is not who you're going to be. Thank you, Frank Bruni. Like, it is actually not high stakes. Yeah, things work out. Life is long, we hope. So I think it's really important to model those ideas to the kids, that this is one step. This is not their whole lives. And
really, we have to believe it. We can't just hear Allison say it
Yes.
And then, like, you have to deep down find a way to believe that this is true.
It's true. It's so true. And I think that, again, you're going to have to go through this again when they're in college, because I think that we've also, as a generation of parents, forgotten that our first job out of college was probably not what we did for the rest of our lives, and was probably not like, the choir singing. And, I had some really amazing jobs when I was in my 20s. I really did, but I had some really bad moments in those jobs. And I can never forget my aunt who realized what I was making right out of college. And she's like, your parents paid what for you to go to college? And you're making what? And do you even have health care? Like, what are you even doing with your life? And I was 23 years old. Like, give me a minute, Yeah. So I think you go through it again when they're in college, but right now you have to realize this is not the rest of their lives. This is one step. It's one step. And it's all good. Everything is good.
Okay, I want to talk about this because I want to warn parents, because I think if we know this is coming, we can actually shield ourselves if it's going to be a problem. Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Okay. So recently I was with a group of freshman girls at a college. I was taking them out to lunch because they have nothing else to do because of COVID. And one of them said to the others, were people mean to you after you got into school here? Because it's a selective university in our state. And a lot of kids don't get in. So the other girls were like, no, nobody was mean to us. And I said, it's not usually the kids, it's the parents. The parents snipe at each other and want to know why their kid got in and not that, what's wrong with my kid? And how did that kid get in? And I know what that kid got on their SATs. I don't know how they know it, but I hear that a lot. So you don't want to go on Facebook. Every parent, we all know everybody uses social media differently. Some people are better at using it than others. And some parents like to post literally pictures of every scholarship letter, every admission letter, and that's their way of being proud of their kids. And some parents post nothing, and you don't even know their kids went to college. And that's another end of the spectrum. And everything in the middle is going to just cause you angst. So instead of being mad at everybody for the way that they are behaving on social media, my advice is that you decide what you can take and what is going to affect you. And you look out for your own mental health and you practice some self-care, the same kinds of things that you'd want your kid to do. And you decide how much of Facebook you can take during the college application season, and when you need to log off, and when you need to maybe snooze somebody for 6 months or whatever it takes. But I think that it's very important not to, I tell the kids, stay in your lane. My husband, who's a swimmer, says I don't understand swimming, and therefore I shouldn't use this analogy, but I like analogies. And I tell kids all the time, if Michael Phelps looks to the right or to the left at other people swimming in the other lanes, he's going to slow down. You got to keep straight ahead in your lane and keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And my husband says that that's not actually how swimming works and that I shouldn't say that, but I think it works and I believe it because I slow down if I look to the right or the left. So I say the same things to parents, like just keep your eyes ahead of you, take care of your kid. I cannot say how much mental health is so important junior and senior years. And these kids are looking to you to be proud of them, to, so many times they come into my office and they'll say, are my grades good enough? Are my activities good enough? Are these essays good enough? What they are saying is, am I good enough? So your job as a parent is to not listen to other parents, not get caught up in the race with the Joneses, and to say to your kids every day that no matter what, they are good enough. They are already good enough. And no college is in charge of telling them whether or not they're worth who they are. They're good enough.
That is the perfect note to end on. So Allison Tate, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And you have a really calming way of approaching college. So I really appreciate it. I'm sure all the people on the call do also. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good night.